Welcome to Finding Your Roots, the Basics, a virtual class from the Zula Biwali Public Library. Please mute your audio during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, click on chat at the bottom of the screen and type your questions. We will answer them during the question and answer session. Dave Clark is the presenter. He is a member of the Cedar Hill Genealogy Society and has been an avid genealogist for 25 years.
Okay, can everybody hear me, Chair? I can't hear you.
I can hear you, Dad.
Okay, good. All right. All right, Finding Your Roots, the Basics of Family History Research. This class is an introduction to genealogy research. How to go about it, and the resources available and how to use them. Obviously, we can't teach you everything you need to know in an hour. So for the old pros here, we're going to miss some things. And this is just the start of a lifelong learning process for genealogy. Okay. It begins with you. You start with yourself and work from there. The original version of that was work back in time. However, especially some of us persons advanced in years and wisdom, we've got descendants that we'd like to track as well. So work forward too. Ask the family for information, artifacts, and stories. For those of you that are lucky enough to have parents or grandparents still living, if you don't have time for anything else, talk to them about the family's history and get their data, and they probably know who all the aunts and uncles are and will give you a good start. So identify your immediate family members, mother, father, siblings, and grandparents, and write down their full names and nicknames and the names before marriage of the women. Nicknames are important because they were often used interchangeably with whole names in older documentation. My great-grandmother, who married in the late 1800s, her full name was Catherine. Her name's Katie on the marriage record. And that's not an exception, that's as much the norm as their full name. Write down the date and place of birth, death, and marriage. I'll call it BDM data here and after. And the place of the event is where it actually took place. And more importantly, the county. So as an example, my granddaughter, who's over 16 now, has lived all but a week of her life in Dallas County. Yet at the time of her birth, her mother had been working up on the edge of Tarrant and Dallas counties, and her OBGYN had admitting rights in a hospital in Arlington. So her birth record, for instance, would be in Tarrant County. Make sure you include the names of the spouses, if there's multiple spouses, and in some cases, if there's relationship partners that bore children, include them. A little bit about online family trees. At this point, most experienced researchers roll their eyes. They're useful for clues for finding ancestors. And I've found them that. They can also be send you down a rabbit hole. Most lack source citations. And as one speaker told us, data without sources are not facts, they're just stories. And they're notorious for bad data. Some people just felt they needed to have a family tree without worried about whether it was theirs. Check carefully against your family data. If you're going to use it, try to match up a couple of generations between your family tree and the person you're connecting with. That will give you a better chance of having it right. Even then, I would enter them as a separate family tree in my database and then go through and check their sources, if there are any. If there aren't any, then go through and find sources for all the data and check for validity. I saw one a rather rare family tree online that had a source citation, and it was for a marriage. And I clicked on it. It was the 1880 census. The 1880 census did not only listed the relationship of the woman or the people in the enumeration to the head of the house. So they assumed because the lady of the house was wife of the head that they were married. And they even had a possible date for marriage. And it was probably based on the age of the firstborn, which, as we all know, can happen anytime, even after marriage. So always look a gift horse in the mouth. If you have a really great looking family tree, that just means it's a promising lead to follow. Got all you can from family? Here's some more resources. Census records. This is where everybody goes first, and with good reason. It's a great way of locating people and getting a whole lot of family information. But you will need to identify your family, including a full family unit back to 1940. That currently is the latest census available to us for another 2 years. Find your family in every census, starting with the 1940 census, and work back in time. And look at the actual image, not just the extract. If it's typewritten, it's not the actual image. All of the censuses through at least 1940 were handwritten. So if what you got ain't handwritten, it's a transcript. That means some other person looked at it and tried to interpret what was there. So we always say, go back and look at the actual document or the image of the document. And while you're there, look at the entries before and after your family. You'll find neighbors and relatives and even some other interesting things. So here's an example of an early census. William C. Hart in the 1850 census, and that's the first census that was taken with Texas as a United States state. He's was one of the original owners of what is now Cedar Hill. As a matter of fact, City Hall, or not City Hall, I'm sorry. It's now the chicken place, plus the town square and all that are on land that he once owned. And this is a rundown of the kind of information you can expect to see for a 1850 census entry. 1850 was the first year that all individuals, all free individuals were named. And it wasn't until 1880 when they identified the relationship with the head of the house there. So, and here's the whole family, and you'll note the birthplace. And if you go down to, okay, down here, William H. Hart is the last person born in Kentucky in about 1830. And the next child was born in Missouri in about 1832. And all of the kids were, all the remaining kids were born in Missouri. And that was 4 years ago. So it looks like they left Missouri sometime after Coeur d'Alene was born, which would have been about 1846. And over here is a reason why you want to look at the actual record. Thomas N. Hart, I know from other research that the middle initial is M, as in Marcus, which is his middle name. And when we went trying to find out what happened to him after the Civil War, we found a whole lot of Thomas Marcus Harts even that participated on both sides in the Civil War. So, and still we couldn't figure out who was the right one, but the middle initial is not a trivial thing. I zoomed in, or here's the actual transcript, and you can see it's written in cursive, and it's an old-fashioned 200-year-old cursive. So it presents some challenge. Zooming in, here is the Thomas M or N, and it's pretty hard to tell from what was there if it's an M or an N. But one of the tricks we use to figure out what the letter is find a entry where we see that letter and we know it's supposed to, what it's supposed to be. And we're in luck here because it's even in the same family. There's Mary, and that Mary, M, looks a whole lot like the M here. So good chance that the transcriber was wrong in calling it an N. Another useful tool is cemetery transcriptions. Their cemetery transcriptions are often the only record a person existed. And sometimes those are in pretty tough shape, but volunteers around the world have transcribed inscriptions from the grave markers, and I've seen the pictures that they transcribed them from, and I find it amazing that they can do it. And cemetery transcriptions were some of the first things posted on the internet back in the olden days of 95, 96, 97. So you can find cemetery transcriptions in libraries and online, and I know our library has some for Pleasant Valley and for Little Bethel and Trees. And you can also find them on like Find a Grave and Billion Graves and others. And they're transcriptions. Somebody looked at the data or looked at the original and interpreted it. So the advice is to go back and look at it. Some of the Find a Grave memorials have actual pictures of the stones so you can see for yourself. There's an awful lot of other genealogical data on Find a Grave memorials, for instance, and they are usually accurate, though not always. But I find that when they start listing the number of children, they're incomplete, and generally as a rule. So if you go and visit the cemetery and check out, verify that that's indeed the person they claim it is, but look around, you'll see relatives, daughters that married and died in childbirth, but the family, her family, married family, didn't have money for a plot, so she was buried in her father's family plot. I've discovered the married names of a number of women by doing that. Vital records and church records. Birth registrations and certificates will give you the date of birth and usually the location and usually the parents. And if you're lucky, the maiden name of the mother. Marriage certificates and licenses. Texas started recording marriages, I think, as soon as they became a state. Unfortunately, they just named the name of the bride and the groom, the bride's name being the maiden name, or at least the latest name before marriage. If you're lucky, the person was underage and they needed a letter of permission from the woman's father, and they're often in with the marriage record, so that will tell you the maiden name, her parents' names. Death certificates. Texas didn't start issuing them till about 1905, I think, and the first ones just named the person that died and maybe the age and the birth date. Later ones, and not much later, included when the informant knew it, the name of the father and mother and the maiden name of the mother, place of birth, usually the cause of death, and the name of the reporting person or informant was often a kid, so there's a clue on another family member. You can first look for more recent vital records in your family's keepsakes. It seems every family's got one of these little tin boxes that they put things like passports, marriage certificates, death certificates. Marriage certificates, you might want to look in Grandma and Grandpa's hallway. There's probably a framed copy of it on the wall. Death certificates, funeral homes issue half a dozen or so copies to send to the Social Security Administration, insurance companies, you name it. So good chance you'll find these things, those records for relatively contemporary people at home or your parents' homes or some aunt or uncles. You can also find them at county records offices and at familysearch.org and Ancestry. And it's kind of random what shows up. If it's a small town or a small county, you may have to go to the county. It's said that only 5% of the genealogical information is available on the internet, and that goes for vital records more than anything. Family Search can be a pretty good source for that. So, and you check their card catalog and stuff like that for what they have. It's going to vary place by place. And in Ellis County, at least, when we made a field trip there, you pretty much had to be next of kin to be allowed to see it. To get a copy of the certificate. You'll find pretty much all the vital record information on church records, and you can find those on microfilm at familysearch.org. If you're lucky enough to be of German ancestry and Catholic or German Protestant, the Germans were compulsive record keepers. And Catholic church records, regardless of the country, tend to be in Latin, which sounds intimidating, except you can read the script, because Latin script is the one we use as Americans and English. There's some indication I've seen from Henry Louis Gates' program that maybe the Church of England still does keep those kinds of records, and maybe even in Latin yet. It was the language of scholars. Social Security records. Obviously, this is only going to be good for people that died after 1937 when they started giving out Social Security benefits, but it's good for contemporary people. The death index names the person, date, and state of issue, date of death, and destination of last check. In other words, where the person was living before they passed on. Applications name the place and date of birth. Also named name as, in other words, nicknames or other forms of the name. Parents, citizenship, ethnicity, and race. Extracts are available online from Ancestry. Those extracts, by the way, come right out of the Social Security Administration's database. So that data was probably entered correctly, which would negate the need for photocopies from the SSA for about $28. And these are also available on many genealogy search sites, both the death index and the search sites. The death index I found, if you start searching by a last name, you can find out how many people of that person's name died and claimed their last Social Security check. So you need a little more supporting information. It helps to have the date of birth and death, or at least some idea when. Here's some examples of these. This is my paternal grandmother. Her given name was Martha. Her surname is Clark. That's her name after marriage. Birth date, Wisconsin. Last residence, that's where the last check went. And the event date is January 1981. Here's my father's application at Social Security. So he applied as Orville Clarence Clark, his Social Security number. There's his birth date, 5 March 22, and the birthplace, New Holstein. His death date was 6 July 1995, and here's the motherlode of genealogical information. His father was Edward H. Clark, and mom was Martha A. Kleinutz, and that's the Martha Clark of the previous example. And down here again, it shows Orville Clark. It appears, and there we go, not quite. Anyway, he was probably listed as Orville Clark on the death certificate, and that's why it shows up in brackets under there. So these are useful for people that died during a time span where you're not likely to get at censuses or at vital records. Publications. This is where you can get a lot of background and historical data and other data. The newspapers contain obituaries, which some are very rich in genealogical information, including names of survivors and the married names of daughters, the elusive daughters, married names of daughters. There are news stories. Sometimes your ancestor, when they passed on, made the news. And so they might be on the front page, as my great-grandfather did. Public notices, you'll find people trying to find somebody to serve notice that they're divorcing, or that they will no longer be responsible for a certain person's debt. Personals, besides the persons looking for love, the small town papers especially indicated when people went and visited their relatives in California or even the neighboring town. In 1930, that was a big deal to travel all the way to the neighboring town. And I actually found the date of my Uncle Fritz's marriage because it indicated that my father and a couple of his siblings and his mom and dad took the train to Baltimore to attend a wedding. City and county directories. Before there was Google, there were phone books, and there were city directories that listed individuals, usually indexed by last name, by address, and by phone number. And these came out about every 2 years. They usually indicated what the person did and where they worked. And I've even seen when a woman, or for that matter, a man's name comes up and the spouse has deceased, they mention that they're a widow. So these are, I've found some of them on Ancestry, but you can be sure to find those in just about every public library. School yearbooks, the public libraries will have those. In Cedar Hill, it's the Historical Society office. They're more for background information and maybe some clues as to who siblings are. And and all of these are, as I said, available online and at local libraries. Land and tax records. This is one of the things that are not as often used as and I think Jerry does too, knows where every one of our ancestors lived in this country, because we've either found it from the census, the name and address on the census, or other from land records. The General Land Office of Texas will have bounty grants, homestead grants, and patents, and who was awarded the patent and who was the original claimant. Deeds describe the land, and that is the boundaries, and some of them are meets and bounds. It goes 500 yards to the oak tree and on and on. They'll also have when purchased or sold and the price, and who sold or purchased, the owner or heirs. And you can identify the married names of daughters and hint at death states, actually, of the original owner and sons or daughters. I found an index listing for William C. Hart in the mid-1870s, and he was there, and so were all of his kids, except there was a couple of grandchildren. So apparently one of his kids who was passed away, and the grandchildren became the heir. William C. Hart disappeared from the censuses after 1870, and I'm guessing he died around 1874 when he showed up in the selling land or there. Tax records include real and personal property. They usually indicate where the property was, and usually by the survey number and by what stream. And for Cedar Hill, it's Mountain Creek and Pleasant Run, and maybe even 5 Mile. And so the real estate, how many acres, the abstract number. Personal property could be equipment, like farm equipment. And through 1865, in the South. Many were slave owners, and there was a column for Negroes. So they will indicate how many slaves they owned and the value of them. You can find these at the Dallas Public Library for at least Dallas County and quite a few other counties, and online at familysearch.org. Do a locality search for records. Probate records, and these are actually kind of fun. Usually have a copy of the decedent's will if there is one. It looks like before 1900, they only ended up in probate if there wasn't a will. We used it to determine the name of the general store owner in Cedar Hill who was killed in the tornado. In what the probate file for him was a note from his half-brother who wanted to be the executor and claimed that James L. Berry had died, and I forget the date, in May of 1856 in the tornado. So we were pretty sure we had the man. There's, again, you can identify married daughters and missing children because they will be named as heirs, and their last names will usually be their married names. Actually, one probate file that I went through had a list of where telegrams were sent to notify the children, the decedent's passing. And so I knew the places in Wisconsin where all of these people were living. And if I hadn't found them independently of that, I would have known from that. They provide clues to financial status and family skeletons. My great-great-grandfather had about 10 notes out that people owed him money. And one of them was particularly telling. He said to my son, August's note for $300 is forgiven, but he will not share in the inheritance because he's already received his. That's one of the minor family skeletons. I saw another will where the probator or the deceased was actually nasty about it. Basically claiming his son was a no good, rotten SOB and wouldn't get a penny from the will. And they're generally underutilized. They're a little hard to find. Dallas County probate records are at the Dallas Public Library and familysearch.org. These are some of the things that probably won't show up on the internet for a long time. My great-great-grandfather lived and died in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. The city of Manitowoc is not much bigger than the county's genealogy site said the index was at the Manitowoc County Library. And once we got the file number, then we took that information to the courthouse and they gave us the file to look at. So you're on your own, you got to figure out where. Okay, minimum information to start a search. And this is a very abbreviated version of a family group sheet. There's grandma and grandpa, all the children, and there's my dad. I've got lifespans, nicknames, and for the married children, there's the married names of the daughters. Why do we need all this information? Pretty well describes a family that is unlikely to be confused with any other family. It's how we know our John Doe is our John Doe and not some stranger with the same name. And you will run into that. I'll give you an example in a minute. It also connects this family to your other families. You've got the names of the parents and the names of the children. So you can connect in both directions. What happens when you have only a name and age? Don Heitzman was a friend of mine. We commuted, carpooled together to our Habitat for Humanity volunteer job every Wednesday morning. And the subject of family trees came up and he asked me if I could do it. I told him, well, yeah, I need the name of his parents and birth dates if he had them, and siblings, etc. But I thought I'd try myself just to see what I could find. I knew his name. He would have been about 5 in the 1930 census, and probably born in Dubuque County, Iowa. What I did not know was the name of his parents and the names of his siblings. I knew I didn't have enough information, but I tried anyway. And here's what I found on the first try. There's the father, William F. Heitzman, 40, Lena Heitzman, 38, and Donald, 5. Donald, 5, that's about right. Told Don the next week we drove what I found. He told me his dad was John, not William. His mom was Veronica, not Lena. Uh-oh. Back to Ancestry with the names of his parents and siblings. And this is what I found. There's John Heitzman, Veronica Heitzman, and there's Donald E. 4. As it turns out, the census was taken in April, and it asks the name, the age of the person at their last birthday. And the other Donald Heitzman already had his birthday by April. This Donald Heitzman I knew had his birthday in December. So he showed up on the extract as having been born in 1926 with the inferred date from being 4 years old. So, and Donald Heitzman, Dubuque, Iowa is maybe a little bit bigger than Cedar Hill now. And it's not all that heavily populated a county. So, and as near as I could tell, neither of the Heitzmans were related to each other. I did some research to make sure that I wasn't ignoring a relative. So we all have a doppelganger around somewhere, and so do our ancestors. And that's where indeed having an unusual first name is helpful. Write down your data and sources. You're going to start developing a lot of information, and you need to organize it in a manner that you can use. So create a family group sheet for each ancestor. It contains all the vital data for the family, including the parents of the parents, and the kids, and often the person they married, if you have it. Uniquely distinguishes your ancestor from strangers having the same name, and links 3 generations in one document. You can make a family tree just spreading the documents out one atop the other. And then illustrate your data so you can figure out where these guys fit in your family tree. So first thing is fill out a family group sheet. And this is a second cousin once removed. Write in the wife's full name, including nicknames. If you don't know either woman's maiden surname, leave it blank. In this case, I was lucky in finding that. And then the spouse. And Kenneth Marple, if you're Agatha Christie mystery fans, he was a detective for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. And I noticed the marriage. I probably estimated his marriage date based on the birth of the first children, and I put about in front of it so that we know it's a guess. But there's Elsie, and I don't know her surname before marriage. You don't want to put Marple in there. That's a given anyway, but there are enough other Marples around probably that he could have married a Marple without marrying a cousin. And putting in the last name of the husband confuses things because, okay, is that her real last name or not when you come on the data? So leave it blank. Then you know you still have research work to do. Then you enter the children. They're all girls, so it's all the Miss Marples here. Fill in as much as you know, even if it's incomplete. Here all I've got is birth date, and they could still be alive for all I know. And the last name, I probably got a lot of this information from, well, a lot of the information from an obituary or the 1940 census, obviously. And the husband's names were definitely from an obituary. And here are the sources, and those are vital. Write in where you found the data for each line of the sheet. Provide enough information so you can find the source again. We're not worried about plagiarism or anything here. You want to know where you found it, because did I read that right? Did I make a mistake? When you find some other information. If you guessed at a date or some other data, say so, or use about or ABT as the abbreviation. If the information is from a relative, name the person. Then you can have a family tree that you have no sources for, but you got from Aunt Ella. And then you know you need to go about actually finding those people in the records. The object is to be able to consider the validity of the data when other information becomes available. And it will be, and it may be convincing, and it may be wrong. Here's a completed family group sheet. This is printed out by Family Tree Maker, which is a very popular genealogy software program. But we have forms both for handwriting and for using spreadsheet or word processor on our website. And I'll show you where to find those and tell you also how to find it if you can't write down the link fast enough. Fill out an ancestral chart. We probably call it a family tree. This one was also manufactured by my genealogy software, but we have a form to do that. And you can bet there's a family group sheet available for each of these persons. Let me zoom in on the top track there. And you can see there's me down here, my father, my grandfather, great-grandfather, and I've got about 3 more generations beyond that, but that is all that fit on the sheet. Here's one that if you're still working by hand, a vertical ancestral chart, and that's probably not a bad way to work. This would be my paternal line, going back to the Atlantic shore. There's me at the top, and it's a little bit abbreviated to get everything on the screen. My father, grandfather, my great-grandfather, and you notice there's an awful lot of Johns here. And it turns out Johann Adams' father is John, then there's a Peter, and then there's a few more Johns. So there's probably a lot of John Clarks running around in the history books. To complicate matters, Johann Adam went by Adam for just about every purpose in his life except a homestead claim in Wisconsin, and there he was John A. And that was more exciting than it had to be finding out what that was about. So anyway, lots of genealogy forms, some census extracts. We've got an index to persons of color in southwestern Dallas County in 1870 on there. And this is our website, and click on resources. You can get to our website by going to the by our public library site, Cedar Hill Library. Google it and it'll find it, and then go down the side to library organizations, click on it, and then click on the Cedar Hill Genealogy Society. And there'll be a visit our site link in fairly small blue lettering up in the left upper corner. And that'll get you there too. So that's what I have to say. It's a whole lot of stuff, but nowhere near complete. But it'll keep you busy looking for your family for a long time. And come to our Genealogy Society meetings, which, if they happen, will be virtual. We usually have speakers that talk about some kind of research. Look around to other genealogy websites. The links are also for them are on our website. They have the same kind of programs. The library may be doing a follow-up series for censuses and vital records. So anyway, we'll open the floor for questions, and I'm going to stop sharing. And there we are. Jared, do we have any people texting questions? I can't hear you.
Yes, I need to get back to the chat
Chat
room.
screen.
Jerry, they should be under the chat thing. You click on it and it gives a list of questions.
I've been chatting.
I've got it too.
You should be able to see the questions.
Okay. Okay, from Ree.
Okay.
We said after the meeting of the recording. These recordings are huge, and they defy the limits of
Email.
email. Usually you got 10 or 15 meg, and the meetings that we have recorded are at about half a gig. So way too big. The library is recording, and I'm not sure what we plan to be used for it. If it can go on the YouTube channel, they can do that. The other thing is, there is a handout for this presentation on our website on the resources. It's right at the top of the page, as a matter of fact.
We can ask Winfred what the library wants to do, because the library asked, or we gave them permission to have the recording. So if they can do something that they can put it on their website or whatever. And I don't know if Winfred can hear me right now, but that would also help. And we do have.
He just unmuted, so.
I can hear you.
Okay, we have, when we record, it comes 3 different ways. There's one that's just audio. That one is small enough to send out, but it's just the audio. The video is the one that does video and audio is the large file, and there's 2 versions of it because different machines have different requirements. But we'll have to have Winfred check on that and see what the library wants to do, if we can do something like that, because we'd sure love to share it. What we can do is we can actually print out that PowerPoint that Dave has, and we probably could send the PowerPoint out, right, Dave?
Yeah, well, actually, I've got a PDF of it on our website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Winfred, you have all the email addresses of the people that signed up, right?
Yes.
So we could send all that information out, including our website link. I really don't want to generate that paper. It's 39 or 40 pages of paper.
Well, yeah, I don't mean paper. I just meant that we could email.
Yeah,
through Winfred.
Yeah, the electronic file is probably easier to use and more useful. So
Okay.
we'll talk about this after the meeting. Pat Miller.
Okay,
I don't know. She wants to know how current Social Security indexes are, and I don't know.
Transcriptions.
Yeah. Well.
It tells everything.
Yeah.
Are not very current. I don't know if anybody does them anymore.
No, the Social Security.
The ones on Ancestry.
The Social Security index is something done by the Social Security.
Oh, the Social Security. I thought you were talking about the Social Security index is done pretty much.
I understand the indexes. This is a transcription of the actual the application.
They're well, Dave.
I don't know how up to date.
Yeah, you're going to have to look. I don't know.
Okay, not a problem.
Yeah, it's how fast do they make them available, and they may want to wait a few years after.
Right. Okay.
Here's Ree again.
Okay. Some of them I answered.
I'm sorry?
I answered some.
Is there software you can use to capture your data and stuff? Yes, there is. Actually, you can use Excel and Word in a number of ways. There's Family Tree Maker. I don't know what that costs anymore.
I don't either. Oh, well, let's see. I don't, it
Yeah.
wasn't too cheap. They can use the forms that we have on off our website. They can, you know, print them off and then use the form.
Or you can use them like the Word template and the Excel template, type them in, you know, obviously change the file name to identify who the person is. And at least you've got typewritten documents.
Another thing we used to do before we used Family Tree Maker was I just took a 3-ring binder and got tabs so that I would have a tab for each family, and then those clear sheet protectors. And as I printed out something that I found about a family, I would put it in under that name. And that way you start keeping some of the things together, and you can then kind of split it out farther as you get into other family members. That was one of the basic ways I started with a long time ago.
Also, Cindy's List is another place you can get a lot of the forms and things. And
Yes,
trackers.
yes. But
Yeah,
our
well, those
actual
forms are also available on our website
genealogical
for printing. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, let's see. Software.
Yeah, that.
Genealogy
we answered that.
websites.
Yeah. If you use Ancestry or Family Search, make sure you keep it private, because you don't want somebody else editing your family tree for you. And from the family trees we've seen online, most people haven't earned the right to do that.
That's
Based on
on Family Search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
On family.
Yeah. Did you know women can have children posthumously by decades? Things like that. There's only one instance of that I know of. Slave
Also.
schedules, they're on Ancestry. I don't think I've seen them on Family Search, but I have to admit I haven't looked. Our website has a transcription of I believe the 1860 slave schedule for this corner of the county.
You can find slave schedules through Ancestry and
Family Search.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Ancestry during the duration of the quarantine is available on the library copy is available online. You do have to have a library card, and if you don't have one, you can apply, and they'll issue a virtual card. In other words, they'll give you a library card number that you can use online. There's also a way to get to Heritage Quest through the library site. It's a little less straightforward than it used to be. And I'm trying to figure out how to coach people to do it before I put it on our website.
You just do a search for Heritage Quest. No, you do a search for text. I had it written down here.
Yeah.
I actually have the directions here.
Yes.
Text
Yeah.
share. You look up textshare.net, and then you go down. It gives you a source of libraries, and you go down to the very last library, which is Zula B. Wiley Public Library, and click on that, and you can get into all the stuff
Okay.
from there.
But you need to be signed in with your library card.
No, you just do textshare.net.
Okay.
They
All right.
changed it, and it has a password. It's TX75104. You do need that.
yes.
Okay.
Somebody
Put
asked,
that information in
Can
the
I
chat.
finish? The other thing, does anyone utilize social media to find family? Yes.
yes.
Sherry
Yes.
and I don't. But we're pretty much done finding our family. So
And the other thing I do is I will Google. I'll either Google a name with a date range, because sometimes other families have put things out there on the internet. I will also Google a location. For instance, I've Googled Luxembourg in Europe because I have family from there, from the little town, and I Googled that, and they actually that town actually has a website. Some of those websites will have some of their data online that you can access. And if it's not in English, Google will let you translate. to English. But anyway, those are some of the things that I use.
Some of the translations are interesting.
They're literal.
Yeah, they're literal. It's like, yeah, but a whole lot better than we'll do. Reed wants to know, or told us to consider using WeTransfer or Dropbox to send large files.
Okay. I
That's
don't know about that.
something.
We'll have to look.
Yeah.
We'll have to check into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we'll let Zula B do that. And from Travis, why is the 1940 the latest available census? The censuses are kept confidential for 72 years. And the 1940 census was open to us in 2012. The 1950 will be in
2022.
2022. And it'll probably be a few months before you can search it. You might be able to access the images sooner and then search it. Man, in the old days, turn in a crank on a microfilm machine, only this would be on your computer screen. So that's why. And at that time, 72 was considered old enough for everybody to be just about dead. So now we've got people outliving that by 30 years, including even we've outlived it. So any more questions?
I'd like to say that you were talking about birth and death records at the beginning of the presentation. Birth records usually are not available or weren't available before about 1900, just like the death records were, more or less. Sometimes maybe 1890s for some states, but I just want to point that out.
It depends on the states.
Yeah, always states, but
Wisconsin had a pre-1907 records that were available. They started keeping full records in 1880.
Yeah, but
so that
in most states, birth records are not available until probably the 1890s, maybe late 1880s. But
yeah, my advice is don't go by the most, go by your particular location.
Sure.
And find out. The courthouse, if you go to the county, the courthouse has a website, and they'll tell you what where you can find records, and probably find out where. The other thing is, if it's a distant spot, local genealogy societies will do lookups for those, and they may want $10 or $20 to do it, but that's a whole lot cheaper than driving all the way to Lubbock, for instance, and spending an afternoon there, and then either staying in a hotel overnight and coming back the next day, or driving back. So anyway, those are all possibilities. And any more quick questions?
Jerry, you mentioned about the techshare.net. Did you give a passcode for that?
Techshare.net. The password is capital T, capital X, 75104.
Thanks, Pat.
that's through the Cedar Hill website.
Yeah, you can do that through the Cedar Hill.
But you have to go through techshare.net unless you're at the library.
But if you have any trouble getting on, be sure and call the library directly, and we can talk you through it.
I got this little thing that's from the library, little piece of paper.
Yeah, the library is not real busy with patrons right now.
No,
so
they're not.
Happy to hear from.
But you can go on the library's website and get to TechShare and then Heritage Quest or whatever that.
Yeah, you could go through there and get to the library that way.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Raise your hand if I don't have you unmuted. But it looks like we're all set. Okay.
All right.
I want to thank you all for participating. If this, if we get good reviews, and if you would like to comment, I don't know, do we have an email address somewhere? I guess not.
You can go to our website again, and there's a contact page, and that'll get to me.
That's at the web. Is that on the last page of your
That was on the last page, and
Of your
yeah, I want to see
portrait.
about sending some of that information to maybe we'll talk with
Winfred.
Winfred
and we'll get
words
it.
and
Yeah,
see what we can do.
okay. Sounds good.
Good
Okay.
job.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
job.
All righty.
You all. Okay, bye.
All right. Winfred, you want to? Yeah, everybody click leave.
Leave and,
Want us to go away?
Yes.
Okay. The little
Goodbye.
red leave
bye,
in the
everybody.
Thank you,
lower right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Leaving meeting. You got two of them.
Yeah. Okay, I'm coming.
All right.
All right, see you, Mr. K.
Bye.
Bye.